Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Ret Paladin mains everywhere. If you've been playing Wotlk Classic and you feel like Ret Paladins were a little under par, there's some pretty good news today. We got our new buffs that you're probably aware of now at this point. There's a new major glyph, Glyph of Reckoning, which allows your taunt to essentially do damage, and now we can apply our Seal of Vengeance with Divine Storm as well as Crusader Strike, which is super nice and getting our stacks ramped up. And you can actually probably like keep your stacks up on multiple targets at once. You'll be able to refresh those with Divine Storm, which will be super nice. I jokingly had made a tier list for Old War as a Ret Paladin main myself, because we're in the D tier, not getting a lot of love. But to be honest, I was pretty happy with how Ret Paladin had been performing in Old War because there are a lot of cleave fights and AoE fights, and not just single target. And there's a lot of mechanics which Ret Paladins tend to do well in because you get a 15% movement increase. I actually have some logs for my Ret Paladin, and I'm not in the best guild in the world. We haven't done all the hard modes, but we've done a few hard modes, and I've been performing pretty well. I actually had respect my paladin to get rid of Glyph of Seal of Vengeance, which is a common glyph to get you 10 expertise out of the gate because you want to be at 200 expertise, which is 26 overall. So it's hard to get that without the glyph. But I had recently got rid of this because there is a lot of expertise on items in Old War, and you are actually using Seal of Command in a lot of fights. So being expertise capped is really nice, especially on fights like Freya, which is a heavy light cleave fight. Kolagarn, but nobody really cares, probably because it's so easy. And then Yogg is obviously like a really cleave heavy fight when you're doing one light with the ads and stuff. So using Seal of Command, and then on Freya you'll use Seal of Command in certain scenarios, and you'll seal swap to back to corruption when you're doing single target. So you can seal swap in between. So having that expertise rating is nice. I didn't want to do like a super deep dive into Ret spec and builds, but I plan to try to do one of those a bit later. I just wanted to make a quick video because I was pretty excited, because I was not expecting a buff to Ret Paladin at all, because to be honest, I felt like I was performing pretty fine. And there's a lot of like mechanics that benefit Ret Paladin and Old War. So this is actually just kind of icing on the cake. And it'll definitely be interesting to see like later down the road, especially in ICC when Paladins get really strong. It's going to be interesting to see what this little buff does then, because I think it'll be pretty nice. And this will actually be pretty crazy because that Ret two-piece set in ICC with your 40% chance on a melee to reset Divine Storm, you'll actually be able to stack your Seal of Corruption stacks quite easily then without even having to target change. So that'll be pretty interesting down the road, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So initially, we haven't raided yet. I'll raid tonight, but I wanted to try to see what this taunt looks like with the new glyph. So I actually went to the training dummy and I did some testing, and I was actually pretty shocked to see the amount of damage that the taunt actually does. So this is just self-buffed might, and then this was using my Seal of Corruption. But you can see that the Hand of Reckoning taunt is actually around 10% of my damage, which is on par with Crusader Strike and even a little higher than Consecration, which was pretty amazing. So I was really surprised to see that. And then I did the Heroic Dungeon today, and I also, on the first boss, just got a little small sample size to see, and it does seem to be about on par with your Crusader Strike, which is super amazing. and that's going to end up being really good damage. It doesn't share, it's not on a GCD, so you're actually able to just add this to any of your macros. For like your Crusader Strike, your Judgment, your Hammer Wrath, you should basically do after your like Crusader Strike, you'll do like a slash cast Hand of Reckoning. So basically, whenever that cooldown comes up, you'll be using that with your abilities to get that additional damage, which I was kind of surprised to see that it was so good. We're definitely not going to be like an Affliction Warlock or anything, but I think it's going to make us like really respectable single target. And then Ret Paladin, in my opinion, already excels quite well on cleave fights where there's multiple targets that we're hitting with Seal of Command. So you can see here, this is like best in slot for the Ret Pally Sim for Old War Phase 2. You'll notice that a lot of this gear is pretty crazy, but you can see in the talents, they have the Glyph Seal of Vengeance, which is the 10% expertise. You have your Glyph of Judgment, and then Glyph of Consecration. So what are you going to replace with Hand of Reckoning? Your Judgment does a fair amount of damage, so getting that extra 10% is nice, and it's off a short cooldown, so you're using it quite a bit. As well as Consecration. Increasing that duration basically is going to mean that your rotation will always have a Consecration down. So it's not the most amount of damage, but it does add up. And if there's multiple like targets on like a cleave fight or something, it's very nice to have that Consecration down for extra damage. So that to me would probably leave this glyph for the Vengeance one, which single target, it's super nice to get that plus 10 expertise, but I would definitely say that it's worth trying to pick some of that up in gear. I wouldn't necessarily gym for expertise, but you can pick up a lot of pieces. Here's my current set that I sim with: an Obsidian Great Helm, 59 expertise. The new tier hands have 40 expertise. A really good item that you can get with Ruined Orbs, and Ruined Orbs are getting pretty cheap, or you can farm them up, is Belt of the Titans. It's not like, it might not even be like your third or fourth best in slot, but getting that expertise to get that expertise cap has been nice. If you're lucky, you can get the Soul Devouring Cinch, which is dropped off Yogg 10-man hard mode. And that gives you 64 expertise, which is actually pretty huge. We haven't seen any of those drop yet, but this will actually be a huge DPS increase because it's got the ability to have three sockets with the belt buckle, and then they're all red, so you get the extra attack power too. But then I also am able to pick up other random expertise with like Ruthlessness, Blade Bear's ring, which I believe is just the normal 25-man drop. Yeah, just normal 25-man drop. I think it might even be like a trash drop. And then I'm still using wristbands of the Sentinel Huntress, which I'd like to replace, but I haven't really got a piece to do that. And this puts my expertise at 244, which is actually quite, it's actually over the cap because you only need 200 expertise. So I'd be able to drop a piece or another X amount of expertise. Ideally, like my wrist would be the next piece to go, but I haven't got a good upgrade for that yet. So using that, the sim doesn't have the new glyph in yet, so I actually had glyph for exorcism to get an additional 20% on my exorcism, which adds up to be a nice little amount. But now that we have the new glyph of reckoning, it's actually going to be quite a bit more DPS than this, so I've substituted it out as well. We're going to raid tonight. I'm actually super stoked and happy because I've been having some pretty good parses and performing pretty well, like XT hard mode. You can see in the logs here that that your seal corruption and your melee accounts for a lot of your damage. Your judgment's a good amount, and then your Crusader strike is around 10%, which is a pretty large chunk. And now that we have the Glyph of Reckoning, that will probably be around on par with your Crusader strike just from the small sample size testing I've done. But it's going to be pretty awesome to see, especially with raid buffs, to see where it's at, and then do some more kind of like playing around with it and see where it ends up. And then they do a pretty good job with the sims, like keeping them up to date, so they'll probably get that pulled in. I always recommend simming your gear and trying to like look at what upgrades you need. Like I'm using 3 out of 4 pieces of my tier, and I'm using the shoulders of my old tier. So a real big upgrade for me would be to swap these out to my 4-piece, and I go, it almost give me 170 DPS increase, roughly 175, which is a pretty good amount. So that's a piece I have on my radar to try to pick up. But I'll probably make some more videos going over simming, specking your ret, kind of some gameplay. I do stream casually. I'll probably try to upload some fights so you can kind of see like mechanically how some of these are done. These last two aren't the best, but I'll probably clean those up. And then when we go to one light, the parse ends up better for hard mode versus like if you're doing something normal. So I feel like I know Ret pretty well. I played it back in retail, and I experienced its glory in ICC, and I've gone through like the ups and downs of it. And I know that Old War was kind of rough this phase where we're slated compared to everything else, but I still felt like it was performing well, and it brings a lot of raid utility like D-Sacks, Hand-a-Sacks on the tank, and a lot of like great utility for the raid. So I think Ret's in a really good spot, and now with these buffs, we'll probably be doing a lot better than we have been in the past, and maybe people won't ignore us for groups and stuff as much as they have. So I hope everyone else is excited as me about these changes. I'm definitely stoked to raid tonight and see how much of an increase this is. The uptime is super big for a lot of fights like that are changing phases, like Mimron, like just getting your 5 stacks up. Because if we look at our logs, obviously our corruption stacks are a pretty good amount. So the faster we can get those up, the better. And those changes, I think, were really good changes. So hope you guys like this video. I am going to start trying to make more YouTube videos and stuff. Probably a lot of WoW related Ret Paladin content for the time being. And if you find this helpful, please like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys.